I'm Rusty Ray in Brooklyn Park, and we're here with the Mayor, Hollis Winston. Good to see you, Mayor.
Good to see you.
And we're talking legislative priorities. We talk a lot about this time of year because cities really put a lot of focus on what they can ask for in St. Paul. And you're working together with some other cities on an area that's a big concern in these group homes.
Yeah, so there's a couple coalitions that we've actually formed to make this work. But I think when it comes to the congregate care, we're working with, I got to remember all the cities. So Brooklyn Center, Robbinsdale, New Hope, City of Crystal, and then Golden Valley has actually signed on. And the reason that we are talking about congregate care facilities is that, especially for cities like Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, I would say Robbinsdale, almost 1 in 10 calls for Brooklyn Park. But for Brooklyn Center and Robbinsdale, over 1 in 10 public safety calls are actually going to congregate care facilities, which is a huge drain on resources, right? And there's a few other things. So I think some legislation was passed last year where cities don't have the same capacity to go in there and kind of see what's going on in those facilities in terms of are the places being taken care of, are they up to code? In the past, we've been able to do that, and we've been able to also ensure that the residents or the folks who are living there are being taken care of as well. But what also comes from that is in terms of the legislation, right? There's a couple things we want to address, and we want to say, look, cities of the first class like Minneapolis and St. Paul, over 100,000, they get to have certain density requirements so they don't have as many congregate care facilities. The other piece we're saying is, look, if we're going to use this many police calls or fire calls, and some of these calls take 45 minutes or an hour and a half, right? Then we need additional resources for that. I want to say the other piece is making sure that the residents that are in those facilities are taken care of healthy. And there's one other last piece. I think people throw this word equity around so much. Well, a lot of the diversity that exists within the metro area or the state lives within the northwest suburbs. And so when you have a number of congregate care facilities that are being taken, you can't get folks in those houses because they've been bought by a business or businesses, right? So in terms of one of our goals as a city is to say, how do we get communities that haven't always been in houses, because then people care much more about their community. They take greater pride, they stay longer, they invest in it more. So I think for those reasons, that's why we're having that ask of the legislature this year.
And as a coalition, that really strengthens that stance and strengthens that ask.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people, the Northwest Suburbs is, I love the Northwest Suburbs because the folks who live here, we happen to be kind of humble on things, right? So we're not used to going to the Capitol and saying, hey, look, we're struggling with this. How can you provide resources for this, right? And so other cities, other regions have typically banded together and they go to the Capitol much more on a regular basis. I think as a coalition coming together and investing more in those resources to say, no, these are some real issues. As cities, we have invested in affordable housing. We've invested in things before almost every other region did. And from that, we're dealing with specific issues because we did what we were supposed to for the entire state, right? I think it's a strong argument when we come together and we realize that what we did in the past is affecting us now. And the legislature does have some responsibility to say, well, how do we get you the resources you need so that you can continue doing what you're doing for the state?
Also talking, a big piece of that was public safety. You're also looking for some help here and a lot of public safety things happening in Brooklyn Park that are unique and not really happening everywhere else, but you also still need some more state help.
Right. I would say so when we look at, and that we also have the coalition for this as well, right, is that those same cities are signing on because unfortunately within the Northwest Suburbs, we tend to deal with higher crime. And because we've made decisions in the past that we don't have the same tax base or tax revenue, it affects our budget more. So if you look at a city like Brooklyn Park, about 60% of our budget goes towards public safety. When you look at other cities in the Northwest Suburbs, they're dealing with the same thing, 50, 55, 60%. For a healthy city, it should be 30, 35%. Part of it is we're dealing with different things in neighborhoods. The other piece is we just don't have the tax revenue because we haven't economically grown as some other areas, right? So what we're saying is, there's a ballpark tax within Hennepin County. And one of the ways we're saying is we don't want to piecemeal this thing with grants, asking Hennepin County for grants or asking the state for grants on a regular basis. It takes a lot of time from our staff and we're not always going to we don't always get granted the grant. So we're saying there needs to be a long-term revenue source to ensure that our public safety is getting what they need. And so we're looking at that ballpark tax and we're saying, well, we get that 40% is going to go to HCMC, another 40% is going to go to North Memorial, but within that 20% percent remaining, we're saying about $2 million for our coalition will really help us with a few things. It would help us with just sharing intelligence, because we know that if something happens at a store in Brooklyn Park, often those same perpetrators are moving around in Robbinsdale, they're moving around in Golden Valley, they're moving around in Minneapolis. So we want to have intelligence sharing, so that we can continue to talk to our other cities. We just want to be able to also continue to invest in, we have an alternative response team which deals with mental health calls. And for the first time in, I think, forever, we have seen mental health calls go down. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's that got to do with crime? And what we say is, well, in the past, it was the police that were having to respond to that. The fact that this team is doing that and pushing it down means that our police can go to some other emergency areas. And they were also investing in community intervention team. They used to be called violence intervention. But what they do is they go to some of the problem areas. They also work with youth to get upstream of some of the issues that we're seeing with crime. And what I think is wonderful about that is that, we've seen that work, but bringing it in-house, we can do a couple things. One, we can ensure the quality of the people that go out there, because we just have wonderful training systems in-house. But some of the information that we could not share before, whether it was certain people doing things within the community or youth that we just want to go to their house and say, hey, listen, how can we get your youth involved with this program? Because we're seeing this negative trajectory, right? We want to stop that ahead of time. I think I'm excited about that being rolled out later this year, because we're able to bring it in a much more professional manner than we have seen in the past.
And lastly here, development, identifying key development areas in the city, in particular, perhaps commercial or retail development along Brooklyn Boulevard in that corridor. That's important to the city's tax base and other things.
So I will, and maybe people get tired of me doing this, but I'll start at the kind of 50,000 foot view. When we talk about a city like Bloomington, right, they're fourth largest in the state. We think we're the fifth or the sixth. No matter what, they're only a few thousand larger than us. Their commercial property values are $5 billion. Brooklyn Park is $2 billion. That is a $3 billion gap. So when we talk about revenue going to our public safety programs or parks or anything else like that, if we close that gap, that probably adds millions to the budget, right? Which gives us room to do many of the things that we want to do and continue investing in that. But part of that is we've said, to get ahead of that, we're going to invest in a biotech district, which, is in the Northwest Corridor. And so we see from, Maple Grove through Brooklyn Park, through Coon Rapids, right? You've got Medtronic and Boston Scientific and Takeda and all these other companies. We're saying within 250 acres that we've designated for that, we really want to grow that out. Well, that's not possible to really lean into that as much as we like, unless we're also redeveloping other parts of the city. And I think Brooklyn Boulevard, when we look at that, that is a gateway to our city. We have some prime real estate that as a city we have bought because we saw a certain direction it was going, and we said, well, if we get some key parcels and we get the right development there, we can ensure that we kind of change the nature and the character of what we're seeing along this boulevard. So it's much more in keeping for what we're looking for in terms of market rate, in terms of restaurant, retail, many of the things that we're looking for in this city. We're looking to the right developers to help us build that out. And we've made decisions to turn away certain developers from that because it just wasn't in line with this vision we have for biotech, for Brooklyn Boulevard, and for increasing this tax base as well. So it is key. And we'll be going to the legislature saying, how can we get some TIF exceptions so that we can have some of the funding mechanisms to get the right developers there. And then we're doing the same thing with the biotech district as well.
Busy times here in the city of Brooklyn Park, busy times in St. Paul.
Yes.
All right, Mayor Hollis Winston, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
For more city stories, check out ccxmedia.org or find us on social media.